Let's talk about how to become a millionaire. And what we are going to discuss today is a proven process. It's a complete process and it's a repeatable process. And I know this because I have been involved in this process multiple times. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself later. But again, my name is Nitin. So the first thing I want to tell you is that in this program, we are going to discuss the vision of how you can become a millionaire. We're going to discuss strategy. We're going to discuss process. And then most important, I am going to provide you resources that will help you actually go through this process. And if you follow this process, I can assure you, not only do you have a chance of becoming a millionaire, but you actually have a chance of becoming a multi-millionaire. So keep watching. So before I get started, I want to explain the meaning of asset because that is what I'm going to help you create. And I'm going to help you create a very particular type of asset, which I call active asset. Now, this is my definition. So assets, in my opinion, and in my vocabulary, are defined in three different types. We have something called the active asset, which provides a positive cash flow. We have something called the passive asset, which provides neutral cash flow. And then we have something called negative assets. And negative assets provide a negative cash flow. So let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's say you're getting married and your in-laws are very happy and they decide to give you $100,000. And they say, hey, take this money and do something good. And so the first person who gets this $100,000 decides to start a business. And that business starts generating net revenues, which means they're making more money than what they are spending. And so it's affecting their cash flow in a positive manner. The money is growing. That is what we call as an active asset. That business which you created is an active asset. Let's say the second person who got this money decides not to start a business, but decides to actually buy a bigger home. So they sell off their older home and they buy a bigger home by adding this $100,000 into the mix. Now, what you have, in our opinion, is what we call as a neutral cash flow. You have a good and better house. You're going to be able to live in it, and potentially the value of the house will grow over time. But of course, to manage and maintain, you're going to spend a lot of money on this house. So they're probably going to cancel each other. And so what you have really is an asset which is sort of going to say in similar value or may increase in value a little bit. But you are not going to have access to that money because you can't sell your house and actually not live somewhere. You need to live in that place. So you're not going to have that free money because even if the house is growing in value, you can't cash it out. So that's what I call a passive asset. And then third, you could actually take that $100,000 and decide to buy a bigger and better and fancy car. Now this is, my folks, a negative asset because you can buy that car and the time you drive off that car from the car dealership, its value is going to start dropping. And you'll have to maintain the car and you'll have to do all kinds of stuff with the car. So the car, which is an asset, is actually going to start taking money away from you than from actually growing money for you. So again, what we want to do here in this program is to help you create an active asset, which means we are going to help you create a business which is actually going to add more money into your pocket, not do something which actually just keeps the original level of money with you or actually drains money out from you. So here's the formula. I want you to look at this formula of transitioning from wherever you are to becoming a multi-millionaire. And the formula is pretty simple, and we're going to actually talk about how you execute it. And then at the end, I'm actually going to provide you resources which are going to be very important for you to actually take this whole formula and execute it. So step number one, you become an employee. So you actually start working somewhere for somebody. Now, the reason we are starting off with this step number one is because currently the entire education system is built around the formula of you actually joining some company and becoming an employee. So that's the simplest way to start off. You become an employee or you are an employee. So that's step number one. Step number two is while you are an employee, you also start growing a small business. That's right. While you're an employee, you start and grow a small business. We're going to show you how to do that in later steps, but that's what you do in step number two. In step number three, what you do is you actually have grown that small business to a certain size, and then you decide to sell that small business to a larger company. And you sell to a larger company because you don't want to continue working on that small business forever. You want to enjoy life. So somewhere at an opportune time, when the business has grown to a certain size, you sell it to a larger business. And because you sell it to a larger business, you're going to get a whole boatload of money. You're going to become a multimillionaire at that stage. And then you take this money and you become an investor and you start growing that money. And now you're investing, so somebody else is doing the hard work of starting and growing a company, and you are getting big profits. And so you keep on growing faster and faster and bigger. So that's the step. First step, become an employee. Second step, start and grow a small business. Third step, sell off that business to a larger business. Fourth step, take the money that you get and become an investor and keep on investing wisely so you make more and more money. Very simple. Now, of course, this looks good on paper, but how the hell do you execute it? That's what we are going to talk now. So essentially, in the formula that we discuss, there is one major big hurdle. And the big hurdle is, how do you transition from being an employee to starting and growing a small business? That is very, very complicated. So how do you start from, just an employee to actually start a company and then you actually grow that company? Most people have no idea how to do it. So we are going to tackle that problem, because if you can fix that problem, then my folks, you can do a lot of stuff and you are going to be rich. So to do that, we actually need to do three things. And I want you to be fully aware. This is not a quick, scheme that can get you rich quickly. This is a scheme which is well planned, is strategic, and requires some effort, some learning, and actually acting on your part. So what we need you to do to actually succeed with the formula that I have given is, first, you need to be ready to put some effort, some extra effort. The second, you need to learn and add some additional skills that you're going to need so that you can actually start and grow your company. And we are going to talk about what those skills are and where you learn. We're going to give you the resources to do that. And third, after you get some of these skills, you need to be ready to act. Too many people in this world actually learn a lot but never act on what they have learned. We don't want you to do that. We want you to act on what we are teaching you here. So the first question comes, how do you transition from just being an employee to actually starting a small business and growing? So let me put out some formulas here. And the formula here and the definitions here are of a part-time worker and a full-time worker. So in my world, if you're putting 40 hours per week, you're working part-time. With that kind of effort, the chances that you become a multimillionaire are very, very low. You need to put in more hard work. So you need to work full-time. What does full-time work look like? Full-time work looks like you're working more than 60 hours a week, every week of your life till you become rich. Once you become rich, you can sit back, enjoy, stay on the beach, drink, whatever heck you want to do, you can do. But till you do that, you need to work full-time, which is at least 60 hours per week. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to work 40 hours for your employer as an employee and do that work well. And then the additional 20 plus hours that you're working, I want you to work on your small business. So I want you to consistently work at least 20 hours per week on your small business while you're working 40 hours for your employer. This way, you have a steady amount of effort that you can put in on your small business. And of course, as your small business takes off, you can start reducing the amount of time you work for your employer and start putting more work on your small business till the time you completely transition and only work for your small business. This, my folks, is a very important formula. Please remember, start with the 40-60 rule, start spending 20 hours on your business, and then from there grow and expand and transition fully out. Now, this is again a very important part of the formula. How do you start a successful business? Because lots and lots of folks want to start a successful business, but very, very few people actually start a successful business. So let me tell you what people do in the step number A, and then I'm going to recommend a completely different formula in step number 2, which is the B step. So what happens in most cases when people want to start a business, they try and think of some idea. So they think of some idea where they can start a business. And then once they think of this idea, they try to create a product or service around or in that idea. And once they create the product or service in that idea, they want to go out and start selling. So they create some kind of a sales process to actually sell that product or service. And then finally, if the selling activity or process is good, then they actually capture some market. If they don't, then the business dies. So now here are a couple of problems in this formula A that's been put up here in blue color. First of all, anybody can come up with an idea to start a business. Anybody can. I'm sure you have come up with multiple ideas to start a business. Now, I am here to tell you that the people who actually have an idea to start a business to those who actually start a business and actually create a product or service is very, very low. I would say for every 100 persons that have an idea to start a business, less than one person actually starts a business and creates a product or service. Yes, my dear folks, very few people actually take action to take that idea and create a product and service and actually start a business. So that's your first problem. The second problem, even if you start a business and even if you have a product or service, they have no idea how to sell the product or service. And so they get a product or service, they invest a lot of money and they cannot sell. And as a result, they cannot capture the market, they waste a lot of money, and at the end, they are very, very disappointed with their entire effort. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to forget step number A. Now, I am going to suggest step number B, which is my own formula. This is very unique and very different than what you have heard. The first thing in my formula you do when you want to start a successful business is you find a large market, a very large market, the largest that you can find near you. So you find a large market. Then you actually study that market and you figure out how the heck that market is buying. How the heck is that market buying products and services? So you figure out the buying process for that market. Then you figure out what kind of products and services is that particular market buying. So you figure out exactly what they are buying. And then in the last step, you start supplying those products or services to that large market. So in this scenario, you are going exactly the reverse way. You are finding the market, figuring out how that market is buying, then figuring out what products or services they want, and then you and your business start supplying exactly those or similar kinds of products or better products in that particular market. And so now with this formula, I am going to actually help you understand how to implement it. So before I get into the implementation, I want you to actually also understand one more caveat in this formula. When you are trying to find a very large market for you to actually sell the products and services as a supplier, Remember, you are a small business. There are lots and lots of large marketplaces which actually buy lots and lots of products and services, but they rarely buy anything from small businesses. So make sure that you do not find a market which only buys stuff, products and services from larger businesses. You want a marketplace which will actively buy products from a small business like you. Now, I am going to help you identify the right kind of market, and then I'm going to help you figure out a strategy to capture that market, and I'm going to provide you resources that you can actually learn to actually get into the market and be successful. And as I said, I have been part of that entire environment. I have seen companies do this time and time again, and I have been involved in that process. So I know what I'm talking works. Again, when you go forward, you need to be ready to invest some time. You need to be ready to invest some money. You need to be ready to learn more. And of course, you need to be ready to create an active asset, which means you want to start a company and grow your company. We're going to help you think through in this program and in the resources, but actually you would have to go out and do this. Now, let me talk about the market itself. We discussed earlier that our formula states that you find a large market, then you start understanding how they buy, and then you figure out what they buy, and then you supply. So here's my answer. The large market that you are going to find wherever you are, whether you're in US or whichever part of the country, is the federal marketplace. All the largest market is always the federal government or the national government. That's what is going to be a large market. And remember, this large market, the large national or federal government, is going to buy lots and lots of stuff. And typically, they're going to buy through a process called RFP and proposals. And that process is standardized, folks. That's standardized pretty much all across the world. And so you need to know that buying process, which is how to submit proposals and how to win that. We're going to talk about how we do that. And then, of course, they're going to buy products and services, and they're going to buy every kind of product and service because the government, especially the national government, buys all kinds of stuff. And they will buy products through what we call the statement of work or a statement of objectives. We don't need to get into it now, but in the resources that we are doing, we're going to go through some of these kind of issues. And then ultimately the supplier is going to be you. So let me go through this again. The large market that you are going to tackle is going to be the federal government. The federal government in US or the federal government in whichever country you are in will be a very large market, probably going to be the largest market in your country. They're going to buy through a process called request for proposals and by you submitting proposals. So you need to understand how to do that well. We're going to discuss that in depth. And then, of course, we need to look at, how they're buying and what products and services they're buying. And they will typically buy through a process that we're going to discuss in the resources. And then ultimately, you are going to be the supplier. And now what's important is that we are going to show you the resources in the demo, which is coming end of this video, where you will learn about all of these things, how to tackle the federal marketplace, how to create great proposals, how to really go out and sell to the government. All of that we're going to tackle. Now, the question is, how do I know so much about this? And why am I sure that this is the way to make multi-millionaires? Now, here's the issue. My name is Nitin Pradhan, and for the last 25 years, I have been the buyer of technology. And the technology offices I led bought billions and billions of dollars worth of products, services, and platforms for the federal government, state government, and local governments. I understand buying and selling from the government perspective. And I was a senior executive in government. You can go out and check me out on LinkedIn or Wikipedia or various other places. You will see that I have been a buyer of technology. And when I bought technology worth billions of dollars for the governments that I represented, somebody else was selling those to me. And while I made good money as an employee, a top executive level employee of the government, the people who were selling to me made much, much more, and they are today multi-millionaires. And I got to see the process time and time again. Every year I was seeing new people come in, sell new products, becoming very rich, and they all use the exact same formula that I am talking here today. So when I left the government, I said, hey, I can actually help create millionaires. In fact, I can help create multi-millionaires. And so I put together this program. I'm talking about the vision and the strategy here on this particular program here. But then at the end, I'm going to give you specific resources that you can use so that you can learn in depth and actually apply the formula that I'm talking. Now, let me go back to the federal marketplace. And so I live in US, and so I'm going to talk about the federal marketplace, which is the US government. Now, if you live in India or China, or wherever you live, you are going to talk about your own federal or national marketplace, which is also going to be very large compared to what other marketplaces are. And so the resources that I have at the end are going to talk more specifically about the US federal marketplace and how to capture, business there. You need to understand that the US federal government is the most sophisticated government anywhere in the world in terms of size and processes and policies. And so if you actually learn how that is working and how you can win business in the US federal government, I think you can apply the same processes in your own country and actually become rich. So while what we have in terms of resources has a lot of bearing on my experience of what happens in the US federal government, what I'm saying is some of those techniques, tools, processes, methodology can also work for you in your own nation. So let me talk a little bit about the US government. So the US government is the world's largest marketplace. Every year it spends roughly $1.1 trillion. That's right. It spends $1.1 trillion annually. Roughly about $600 billion is in contracts and about $700 billion is in grants. That is such a large amount, it's more than the GDP of many countries around the world. Now, just to give you an idea of the size, the total venture capital market, the VC market, the total amount that the VCs invest in US is roughly about $60 billion annually. So if you're starting to hear about the VC market, and if you're listening about, California and Silicon Valley and the Boston corridor, and you're looking at, how much investments VCs make, they're making roughly $60 billion. The contracts alone that the government gives is $600 billion, 10 times more than what the VCs invest. And if you actually look at the grants, that's even more than 10 times. And what's important? The governments typically will have set aside opportunities for small businesses, minorities, veterans, women, all kinds of activities where specific opportunities to buy for the government would be actually set aside for a particular class of businesses. For example, in US, there's a large amount of buying that the government does only from women. And there's a large amount of buying that the government does only from hub zones, which are historically underutilized zones within the US. Or, for example, the government buys a lot of stuff from small businesses which are minority owned. So again, you need to know what this entire process is. You need to get prepared and you need to actively engage. And if you do that, this is the opportunity, because the market is there, because the process to enter the market is very clear, because what they want to buy and how much they want to buy is very clear, and they have set aside stuff, especially for you, small business. This kind of scenario doesn't exist in any other marketplace. That is why I'm saying Whether you're in the US or whether you're in other parts of the country, learn the process, actually become good at it, and there's absolutely no reason why you will not start winning government orders and actually become a multimillionaire. Now, just to provide you proof of what I'm saying is really this particular map of US. So if you see, this is a map of US from the US Census Bureau, and actually if you go back and look at the area where Washington DC is, this is where Washington DC is, and this is the location around Washington DC. And if you see, all of it is really green here, which means that these people are actually fairly rich. And the reason these people are rich is because the federal government is located in DC, and it's actually putting out a lot of contracts and grants which companies in and around are winning, and that's how they're becoming rich. And so this is proof number one, folks, that actually this what I'm saying is working, because the locations in and around Washington DC are very, very rich, and they're becoming rich because the government is putting out a lot of contracts and grants. Now remember, the government is putting out contracts and grants all over US. It's not that they're just spending in DC, but the businesses who are doing work with the government are primarily located there, and that's why they're making a lot of money. But you could be located anywhere, and if you understand the process of how you work with the federal government, you too could make a lot of money. Now, let me go to the next chart itself. Not sure why it was not going ahead. But now that we are to the next chart, let me actually talk about another viewpoint. So this again is the chart from the Census Bureau. And what we are doing is we are actually showing the median household incomes by counties, and we are actually talking about the top richest counties in US. So of the top 20 richest counties in US, 9 of them are in and around Washington DC. And again, the reason is simple, because the federal government is there. The federal government puts out a lot of contracts and grants. There are a lot of federal contracting companies and federal supplier companies which are located there. They're actually getting a lot of this business, and that is why this region is becoming very, very rich. Just to give you an idea, the national median household income in US is $55,000. And if you actually look at the Washington DC metro region, as it's called, that number is roughly double. That's the richest part of US. That is right next door to the capital. Now, I said I promised you that I will provide you an action plan. So let me talk a little bit about it. So the action plan actually involves 3 steps. First, you need to act and engage. I have provided you the knowledge. I'm going to provide you the resources, but unless you act, nothing is going to happen. So that's the first thing you need to do. The second thing you need to do when you act, you need to have really 2 parts to it. There is what we call the startup mechanics. This is like, starting the company, registering for government opportunities, all those kind of things. That's just mechanics. Anybody can do that, but most don't. So you need to do the mechanics. But the mechanics alone are not going to win you business. You need to strategize and win. So you need to have really the learning behind it of how to win. And so that's what we're going to discuss in the resources that we have. Just to give you a pointer, there are roughly 30 to 40 million businesses in US. Less than 1% of the current US businesses are working with the US federal government. And if you are in other countries, the chances are it's going to be very, very similar. A very small portion of your companies will have figured out how to work with the government, because traditionally it's thought that working with the government is complicated. So most companies don't do that. But if you figure out a way of how to do it, and if you build relationships, then that can be a very steady business. Even if there's recession or no recession, the government spends, folks. So if you want to really become rich, that is a very simple and straightforward way to get in. Now, I told you at the beginning of this whole session that we are going to actually have an action plan and a few resources. And so I'm actually going to list the resources in the comment section here today. So you can go down and actually look at the YouTube comment section and you'll find the links to these resources. But you could also go to scaleupusa.xyz and actually look at these resources. If you go to scaleupusa.xyz, you can go to the catalog or the collections area. There are lots of programs there, but I would suggest you look at these 3 programs. Look at the Federal Business Accelerator program. That's the primary program I would suggest you start with, because it's going to give you all the knowledge you need to get started. Then there is a specific program called Winning Proposal Writing that talks a lot about proposal writing. So you may want to take that, because that's your method to actually sell into the government. And then of course we have a very unique program called Corporate Sales Acceleration. This is really if you're going to go out and sell sophisticated products and services into the government, then this is a program that you probably need. So you need to look at these 3. So at the very least, I would suggest you do the Federal Business Accelerator and the Corporate Sales Acceleration program. The proposal writing program actually is included in the Federal Business Accelerator program if you take it. If you don't take the Federal Business Accelerator program, then I strongly suggest you do the Winning Proposal Writing program. So with this, let me quickly show you the demo of where these resources are. What I encourage you to do is to actually, use this particular video as a guide and then follow the path of the Federal Business Accelerator. That's the most complete program that we have for helping you to start doing business with the federal government. Now, one thing that I want to mention again, this particular program is related to helping you grow within the US federal government. But what I will tell you is that even if you're not part of the US federal government, the tactics and the techniques and other things that are discussed here are very, very important, and you can actually learn from them and try to apply similar lessons to your own country and to your own national government or the federal government. So yes, because we get this question all the time. We get this question saying, if you're not in part of US, can you still learn from them? And the simple answer is yes. Obviously, if you're doing this for the US government, it would be much, much more helpful, but it's also going to be very helpful if you're in other countries. The second question that we get during this time is people are saying, hey, if I learn how to do business with the federal government, is it also going to help me to do business with the state and local governments? And my answer is absolutely yes. The US federal government is the most sophisticated buying agency for products and services anywhere in the world. So if you understand their processes and learn how to work with them, anything like working with local state governments or local governments or the county or working with, your educational institution, all of those will become much similar because you have sort of understood the more complex and the most sophisticated area to do business with the government. So again, I encourage you to go back, look at these resources, join them. There's a small amount of fee, but again, as I said, if you want to get in and become multi-millionaire, you need to be willing to spend some effort. You need to be willing to learn something, and you need to be willing to spend a little bit of money. So that's what we have done. So let me go out and show you the demo for this particular resources. So the first thing I would suggest is you go to scaleupusa.xyz and you should be looking at a homepage like this. Of course, our homepage keeps on changing based on new designs that come in. So don't worry if you see a different kind of homepage. But again, this is the homepage that you need to go. It's called scaleupusa.xyz. You go there, and then what I would suggest, you click on federal. Okay, and if you don't see the federal link here, here's the catalog link where you go to the catalog and you should be able to search any project there. But ideally it should be here. You just click on federal And once you click on federal, you're going to come to Federal Business Accelerator Program. And this is the whole program. There's a free preview. You can join the free preview, but I've sort of talked about what is there in the free preview in this video itself. So you may not find it all that helpful. What I would suggest is buy one of these particular ways into the program. You can either do a monthly purchase, so you pay some money upfront for the first month, and then a monthly payment onwards, or you can do a 1-year payment. You should normally have access to this program for about a year, because you may have to go back and research and talk to them and sort of learn from it. So again, I would suggest if you have the funds, go out and do the yearly purchase, but if you can't, then you can do the monthly purchase and you can have the monthly subscription. So this is the program that we have. This is all the information that's there. So there's a program curriculum. It has all the information that's there. It's a lot of information. It's very step by step. It's planned so that you can learn it easily. And it's sort of set up so you can actually start your own company and actually grow it. So there's lots and lots of information here. I don't think there's any other place where this kind of complete information available for doing business with the federal government. This is the whole section on writing winning proposals. Again, very big section, very important section. Lots and lots of material here. That's what I would suggest you go back and do. It will take you some time to go through this whole program, but it's not designed so that you actually just go out and just read the whole thing. You need to actually take this information, absorb it, and then start implementing it, because that's the way you're going to go out and win a lot of business. So this is the number one program that I would absolutely encourage you to take. This is very critical if you want to take the path that I'm saying to actually making a lot of money. The second thing that I would suggest is look at this sales program. This is again a terrific program. This talks about how do you build a sales team, including a sales team to actually go out and win federal contracts. This goes way beyond just the proposal writing activity. This is a very sophisticated program. If you're selling sophisticated services like technology products or services or some other kinds of products or services, this might be a program that you may want to take and look at. Again, very detailed information. Again, the same two types of models. You can take a yearly fee and do a yearly course, or you can do a month-by-month course. Again, what this program has is also laid out here, so you may want to do that. And then, of course, you can go to the catalog, and the catalog has a whole bunch of information. One of the other programs that I would suggest you look at is Market Development as a Service. This is a program, again, in the catalog. Again, you may find this very useful. This is a free program. This is a very advanced program. So this is actually a program that you take after you have done the Federal Business Accelerator and you have done the Corporate Sales Acceleration. I would encourage that you take this program. This is a later stage program, but again, very, very useful. So again, all I'm saying to you folks is we have provided you a very unique way to actually go out and actually make a lot of money. And whether you're in US or whether you're in other parts of the world, we think that working with your national government, your federal government, and actually winning contracts to actually supply products and services to them is a very lucrative business, because these agencies buy a ton of stuff and most companies doing business with them are not that sophisticated. And plus, there is a lot of opportunity that the government may have set aside opportunities for small businesses. So you actually have some opportunities that you're competing only with other small businesses and not competing with the larger businesses. So again, all the best, and actually go out and win some business and become rich. Thank you.